Thank you everyone for joining us today as we discuss the pharmacy school application overview and demo the PharmCAS application system. There are probably a number of you who have some concerns about how the COVID-19 pandemic might end up impacting your pharmacy school application. So there's a link here that you can utilize to find centralized information that's been compiled by the National Association of Advisors of Health Professionals. And so there is a section here dedicated specifically to pharmacy, where you can see that AACP, the American Association of Colleges of Pharmacy, has provided some detailed information about how they currently see the COVID-19 impacting pharmacy admissions. It's important to note that this is updated as of April 8th, and so additional updates can be provided by AACP as the pandemic has potentially further consequences into the application system. So a lot of the details in here are for the current 2020 application cycle. Please note that for students who are applying in this upcoming summer, you will be applying in the 2021 cycle, so applying to matriculate into a program that starts in 2021. That being said, I do want to kind of jump back to then talking about the application cycle kind of as we see it right now. So typically the application cycle to a pharmacy program takes approximately a year, including preparation. So right now in the spring of 2020, I'm going to go through these in some reverse order because you probably should have started to think about the schools that you're interested in applying to. And so researching schools is the first kind of important step in beginning your application process, because a lot of the application details will be dependent upon the schools that you select. PharmCAS has a really great tool for looking at schools. So if you go to the pharmcas.org website and select the school directory, you will be able to see information on all of the PharmD programs in the US. There are some filters that you can use to organize these. For example, PharmCAS deadline, whether a school is public or private, other residency or required tests. And required tests is one that I want to point out, because not every pharmacy school is going to require that students take the PCAT exam. Typically, we see about 80% of schools require it, with a few additional leaving it as an option, and then some schools that just don't require it or consider it at all during the application process. And so dependent upon the schools that you're selecting to apply to, that may make the decision as to whether you even need to take the PCAT exam at all. In addition, you can find information on a number of different components of programs. So I'm going to scroll down here to Purdue so that we can look at the Purdue program. You'll find that this database has general information about the school, including a link to the pharmacy program website, information on their deadline. So this is for the current application cycle, which has not closed yet. Accreditation status, some basic information about the program itself in regards to the length, whether a bachelor's degree is required for admissions, early decision, and other components. General information about the program, as well as some program statistics, the program-specific criteria and prerequisites, including course information, whether the school utilizes a supplemental application, which we'll talk about in more detail in a few minutes, information on whether they require or even consider the PCAT exam, or if other exams might be required, such as the TOEFL for international students, information on residency options, letters of recommendation. So who are they, how many and who are they kind of looking for in terms of your letter writers? Some details about interviews, as well as information for accepted applicants in regards to seat deposits. So this is a really great tool to utilize to be able to see some relevant information all in one place. As always, you're going to want to check with the individual school's websites, particularly because in the current application cycle, with many schools moving to pass-fail options for graded coursework for spring of 2020, as well as online coursework for spring and potentially summer of 2020. Many schools may have made changes to their admissions policies that will likely be reflected only on their individual school website. So once you've made a decision about the schools that you are planning to apply to, and whether that will require you to take the PCAT exam, then you can decide whether you need to prep for the PCAT exam. Typically, we encourage students who are planning to take the PCAT to start that preparation process early in the spring semester. There are also components of your application that you can begin to prepare in advance of the application actually opening in the summer. That would include things like your personal statement, which is a document where you will identify your rationale and motivation for wanting to become a pharmacist. That essay is something that you should take some time and really focus on the writing and revision. I encourage students to seek advice from advisors, trusted faculty mentors, pharmacists that you might be working with or shadowing to get feedback on the content, as well as having someone from the Writing Center review it for grammar, mechanics, and overall style. As we move into the summer, if you're planning to take the PCAT, you will ideally want to take that in either the April administration or the July administration, as many schools will begin reviewing applications early, and you'll want that PCAT score attached to your application. You'll also want to submit the primary application known as PharmCAS, which we're going to demo in a few minutes. The primary application is the centralized application that you will use to submit information to all of the schools that you plan to apply. You also, upon submission of the primary application, may receive secondary applications from individual schools. It's important to take into consideration that secondary applications you will likely want to turn around within approximately 2 weeks of receipt if they are not included within PharmCAS. And we'll talk about the difference between primary and secondary applications, and you'll be able to see some examples of those questions and how those are included potentially in PharmCAS or submitted separately. Moving into the fall semester, so many schools will start their interview process in the fall. Interviews can begin as early as September or October and will continue into the spring semester for many schools. Ideally, applicants will receive decisions within no more than 30 days from the date of their interview. Your decision could be approximately one of 3 things. An admissions offer, in which case congratulations, a rejection, or potentially being put on a wait list. As individuals who have received multiple acceptances confirm the individual school that they're going to matriculate to, the schools they've decided not to attend will have admissions openings, and those schools will pull from the wait list. So those decisions about being pulled off of a wait list can happen in the spring and sometimes even into the summer. You'll note that many schools for pharmacy have delayed deadlines. So their application deadlines might be in January, February, or even March. But we encourage students to apply early in the cycle so that you are considered for rolling admissions. Rolling admissions is where schools will review applications as they are received, make determinations about which applicants they would like to invite for interviews, and in many cases conduct some interviews and make admissions decisions prior to deadlines passing. And so it's important for the schools that hold rolling admissions processes that you apply early so that you can be considered most favorably within that application cycle. PharmCAS as an application is scheduled to open on July the 14th. When the application opens, you'll have full access, including being able to complete all components and submit your application. However, we don't encourage students to try and complete this process all in one day. As we move forward and demo the PharmCAS application system, you'll see that there are a lot of components, including a very detailed coursework section that you should take your time on. We do encourage students to have their application submitted by mid-August, or essentially before the fall semester begins. This will allow you to be through the verification process and considered early in the application cycle, specifically for schools who will begin interviewing as early as September. I mentioned before that there is a difference between the primary and secondary applications. PharmCAS is your primary application, the centralized service that you will use to complete your application and submit it to any schools that you select. This application is mostly data entry, with a few exceptions, and is used to confirm requirements necessary for each school. These may include things like prerequisites, GPA calculations, PCAT or other entrance exam scores, as well as observational requirements and any sort of experiences that are relevant to the admissions committee. This application is generic to the school because every school will receive the same information. However, the secondary application, which can either come later via email directly from the school, or in some cases may be embedded within the school-specific sections of the PharmCAS application, is school-specific and is largely essay questions. Most secondary applications consist of 3 to as many as potentially 10 essay questions that address your interest in a particular school, as well as topics that are relevant to the admissions committee. This is the opportunity for you to show your personality and demonstrate your interest in a particular institution. Secondary applications that are not included in part of the PharmCAS application system should be returned to schools within about 2 weeks from receipt. Your application will not move forward for consideration until schools have received your secondary applications. So it's important to return those in a timely manner so that your application can continue to be reviewed. There are a couple of things that are important to know as we move forward in talking about the PharmCAS application. I strongly encourage students to review the application system instructions, which you can find on the PharmCAS website. I know that application manuals are not the most riveting piece of reading. However, they provide a lot of detailed information for a very complex application system. I recommend reading the application instructions prior to beginning your application and then having them on hand as a reference as you move through the sections in the PharmCAS application system. The next thing I want to talk about is transcripts. As an applicant, you will be required to submit transcripts from every institution that you have college credit. This includes institutions where you may have completed dual credit in high school, regardless of whether that dual credit was transferred to IUPUI or whether it's being used towards your degree. You'll also submit transcripts from any other institutions that you may have attended prior to IUPUI, including vocational or specific college types like a nursing school. For those who have graduate education, you'll also submit transcripts from those institutions. Each school has a separate process for requesting transcripts, and many, including IUPUI, have an online request process. You want to submit your transcripts in a time that will allow it to be received by the application system prior to when you plan to hit submit. So for example, if you plan to hit submit on your PharmCAS application on August 1st, you would want to make sure that PharmCAS has already received all of your transcripts prior to August 1st. The transcript request and retrieval process can take up to 2 weeks. Each school will have its own request process, and then the registrar's office will have to process your request, compile, print, and package your transcripts for mail, mail your transcripts to the PharmCAS application headquarters, and then PharmCAS will need to receive, process, unpackage, scan, and attach your transcripts to your application. Once you've submitted your PharmCAS application and all of your transcripts have been received, it will be marked as complete, ready for review. If your submitted application does not have any or all of your transcripts, it will be put on hold until all transcripts have been received. Once your application is marked as complete, ready for review, it will move into the queue for verification. This process can take as few as a couple of days and as long as 6 weeks, depending upon the volume of applications that PharmCAS is receiving at that time. This is another reason why we encourage students to submit their applications early before the volume of applications received results in the verification process taking 4 to 6 weeks. Once your application is moved to the top of the queue, a staff member from PharmCAS will pull your application and compare your transcripts to the information that you have entered within the PharmCAS application regarding your coursework. They will go line by line to ensure that everything matches, and if there are any components that don't match up, your application can be returned to you with a note for corrections. Once your application is corrected and resubmitted, it will go back into the queue for verification. So this is a first component where applications can get held up if students are not paying attention and diligently completing that section of the application. Some students have questions about why PharmCAS requires students to enter information about every course in the PharmCAS application if they're required to submit copies of their transcripts. The reason for this is that the PharmCAS application uses the information that you have provided within the application to calculate various GPAs. This includes your cumulative GPA, science or prerequisite GPAs, as well as year-by-year GPAs. PharmCAS is responsible for verifying that the information that you provide within the application is accurate, and hence the verification process. Once your application has been verified, then it will move forward to the individual pharmacy programs to which you've applied. There are some common application components that we'll go over before we look at the PharmCAS application itself. So the application has a section for biographic information where it will collect biographic and demographic information about you. The academic history and coursework section includes information about all of the schools that you've attended, as well as your coursework. Your entrance exam section is where you will provide information on the PCAT or other relevant exams that schools are requiring for their applicants. The experiences section is the opportunity for you to provide information to the admissions committee on the things that you have participated in outside of the classroom. The next section, the letters of evaluation, sometimes referred to as letters of recommendation, is an opportunity for you to provide information on the individuals who have agreed to write letters of evaluation on your behalf. Ideally, you want to have conversations with the individuals that you are asking to write your letters early in the application process. I suggest that students start approximately when we return from spring break through the end of the spring semester and reaching out to individuals and asking whether they would be willing to write a letter of recommendation on your behalf. Schools may have specific preferences regarding letters of recommendation, and so you should utilize the PharmCAS school directory as an opportunity to identify the schools that you are applying to's preferences. These might include individuals such as a science faculty member. By science, they mean biology, chemistry, or physics. And by faculty, they mean an instructor for whom you have had in a course. Additional possible preferences might include a non-science faculty member. So again, an instructor that you've had outside of the disciplines of biology, chemistry, or physics, as well as potentially pharmacists that you have worked with and or shadowed, research mentors, supervisors, or other relevant individuals. The personal statement section is where you will provide the content of your personal statement, approximately 4,500 characters, which is used to address your motivation for pursuing a career as a pharmacist. Your school designation section is the section that you will utilize to identify the schools to which you plan to apply and provide any school-specific information. The final section is fees. The PharmCAS application has a flat fee that is for the use of the application as well as to apply to your first school. Every additional school that you choose to apply to will incur an additional fee. In addition, many schools who utilize a secondary application will have a secondary fee associated with it. If you have concerns about the cost of applying to a pharmacy program, I encourage you to look into the PharmCAS Fee Assistance Program. You can find information on the Fee Assistance Program requirements and application process by Googling Pharmacy Fee Assistance Program. The Fee Assistance Program will provide a discount for a specific dollar amount in regards to your application. In addition, many schools will waive or greatly reduce the cost of their secondary fees for students who have a fee assistance waiver. As you start to think about your application process, there is a checklist that you will want to follow. We've already talked about researching schools and identifying the schools that are the best fit for you. You'll also want to explore the PharmCAS application service, which we will do here shortly. I also strongly encourage students to get advice from a pre-professional advisor in regards to preparing for and completing your application. If you are a School of Science major or an honors student, you can schedule an advising appointment with the PREPS office by utilizing SSC Campus in 1.IU. If you are not a School of Science major, you can schedule an advising appointment through the Health and Life Sciences Advising Center. Information for how to schedule with that office is on their website at hls.iupui.edu. We've also talked about identifying your recommenders early in the process and composing your essays. Finally, you'll want to start thinking about organizing supporting documentation. This might include information such as the experiences or observation hours that you would like to include in your application, including a contact person who can verify that your experience is valid, the dates and hours involved in your experience, as well as a brief description. I also strongly encourage students to think about cleaning house with your social media. Admissions committees have access to the internet, including all social media platforms, and are often known for doing a little bit of research on potential interviewees. You should pay particular interest to social media handles that you may have not thought about in many years, things you utilized in high school or early in your college career that may have unflattering posts or photos that you would not want the admissions committee to see. I encourage students to do a thorough cleaning of house so that your admissions decision or interview invitation is not hinged upon unflattering and hopefully old social media posts. Additional preparation should include thinking about your interview. Most interviews include some questions around ethical scenarios. So I encourage students to read the American Pharmacy Association's ethical guidelines. You should also be watching or reading the news within the healthcare field. COVID-19 and the current pandemic is a huge issue for healthcare professionals in many different fields, including pharmacy. In addition to the pandemic, you should be aware of other major issues that face the pharmacy profession. In terms of financial planning, you'll want to make sure to create a budget for your application fees. But in addition, you should be thinking about the costs of interview travel, deposits, and other things you might need to spend money on as a part of your application process. If you are planning to apply locally, you may have limited interview travel expenses, but if you are applying to schools that will require more substantive travel accommodations, such as a plane ticket or hotel, you'll want to make sure to budget for those. In addition, every school has a seat deposit, a deposit that applicants must put down to confirm their admissions as the application system moves forward. In addition, I encourage students to think about filing their FAFSA for the 2021-2022 academic year early. Typically, this opens in the fall semester prior. This will allow you to be considered for any need-based or school-based scholarships that might arise. I also strongly encourage students to think about developing a parallel plan. What will you do if you're not accepted into a pharmacy program in this cycle? This is a great opportunity to work with an advisor within the PREPS or Health and Life Sciences Advising Center. As I move forward with loading the PharmCAS application system, does anybody have any questions? All right, so we're now logged into the PharmCAS application system. As you can see, the application is divided into 4 quadrants. Each quadrant will have a number of sections that you are required to complete. The personal information section starts with a release statement. These are releases that you are required to respond to in order to utilize the application. You'll notice that one of these releases is an advisor release asking whether you would like to release your application to the health professions advisor on your campus. These individuals have been appointed by the campus to have access to such information that can help assist you through the admissions process. We do not have access to particular details such as the contents of your personal statement or letters of recommendation. We do have access to general information such as your PCAT scores, GPA calculations, the schools to which you've applied, and your application status. This allows us to help advise you as you move through your application cycle and should you need to reapply in a future cycle. Your biographic section is going to ask basic information about your name, gender, and birth. The contact information will ask you for information regarding your current and permanent address, as well as phone and email. I encourage students to utilize an email address that you check frequently, but perhaps one that does not have a large volume of incoming email. This is the email address that the application system as well as individual schools will utilize. You want to make sure that the email address is one that you are not going to inadvertently miss a timely communication. The citizenship section asks for information about your citizenship, state of residency, and/or visa. This parent or guardian section is an opportunity for you to provide information about your parents or guardians. It's important to note that optional sections, unless otherwise specified, are available to the admissions committee for review. The race and ethnicity section has optional questions for you to complete regarding your race and ethnicity. The other information section is a catch-all for a lot of different types of questions. Applicants will be required to submit information on their language proficiency, including their native language and any additional languages that they speak. You'll also be asked about felonies, misdemeanors, or license infractions. If you select yes to any of these, you will see an additional box with the opportunity to describe the incident in 500 characters or less. You will also be asked information about whether you have previously attended another health professions program, such as medical or dental school, background information about yourself, special life circumstances that you would like the admissions committee to potentially consider, as well as your future enrollment plans and any academic or behavioral infractions. Again, if you select yes to the academic or behavioral infractions, you will have an additional box with an option to provide information about the specific incidents. The last section within personal information asks about your military history. The next section is your academic history section, where you will provide information about the high school you attended. You do not need to provide your high school transcripts. The colleges attended section is the opportunity for you to enter information about every college campus that you have completed coursework. When you enter information, it will ask you about the campus that you have attended, whether you were planning to complete a degree, whether that degree was in progress or has already been awarded, and your relevant major, minor, or graduation date. In addition, it will ask you about whether the university worked on a quarter, semester, or trimester system. I want to point out that for individuals who have college credit from multiple IU campuses, including IUPUI, you will want to enter those campuses separately. So if you have coursework, perhaps dual credit, that you've taken through IU Bloomington or one of our regional campuses, you will include that campus separately from IUPUI, as well as any additional campuses or institutions where you have completed coursework. Once you've reviewed this information, you will be able to download the transcript request form. This is a PDF form that you can save or print, and you will want to have submitted with your transcripts. The form provides information about your unique CAS ID, your name, the institution with which you are requesting a transcript, and where those transcripts should be sent, as well as your barcode. This is utilized for PharmCAS to scan and attach your transcripts with your application. This is where I want to differentiate between requesting transcripts and entering college information in the application. All Indiana University campuses are included in a centralized transcript. This means regardless of whether you've taken coursework at one or multiple institutions, when you request a transcript from IUPUI or any IU institution, that transcript will provide information for any IU campus that you have completed credit. So while you might be entering multiple campuses into the PharmCAS application system, you will only need to order and pay for one IU transcript. It also doesn't matter which transcript matching form you use, whether it's IUPUI or another campus. That form, when attached with your completed IU centralized transcript, will fulfill the requirements for PharmCAS in terms of having completed transcripts for all campuses. It's important to note that not every institution that has multiple campuses utilizes a centralized transcript. So if you've attended another institution that has multiple campuses, you should check with that institution's registrar's office prior to ordering your transcripts. I also want to point out at this point that you should be waiting to order your transcripts until your spring courses have posted. You'll want to make sure that you have your spring grades included on your transcript before you request the transcript to be prepared and mailed. Moving forward, you will then have the opportunity to provide information on all of the coursework that you've taken at each campus. You'll select this term, your academic status, and whether that course was completed, is in progress, or is being planned for a future semester. You'll then add information about the specific course. So the course code for K101 is BIOL-K101. The course title is Concepts in Biology 1. You'll then code the course based on the content of the course. So for example, you might think that BIOL-N261 should be coded as a biology course because it has a biology course code. However, the content of that course is anatomy and should be coded as an anatomy course. You'll then enter the credit hours and grade as it appears on your transcript and hit save. And then repeat for all of your coursework. This is a very time-consuming process, and I encourage students to print copies of their unofficial transcripts, grab a ruler and a marker. As you go through in the order as it appears on your transcript, You can then cross off information to ensure that you haven't missed anything. This is also where you want to be incredibly meticulous and double check your work. Because if the information that you provide in this section doesn't match the information that appears on your transcript, this is where the application system can kick it back to you to fix those errors. The next section that we'll look at is the standardized test section. So if you are applying to schools that require a PCAT, you'll add information about your PCAT score. All you need is the date that you have taken the test or plan to take the test, as well as your unique PCAT CID. This will allow the PCAT scores to be attached to your application upon official release. You can self-report your scores if you have them, but if not, don't worry, because those will be overridden by your official scores anyway. If you have additional tests that you're required to complete, for example, the TOEFL, you can add that information here as well. The next section, supporting information, provides a lot of information useful for the admissions committee and getting to learn a little bit more about you beyond just your academic metrics. Here is where you will enter information for the individuals who are writing letters of evaluation on your behalf. Please note you can only enter a maximum of 4 evaluators. As you create the evaluation request, you will be asked whether you are submitting a committee evaluation. A committee evaluation is comprised of letters of recommendation and a committee evaluation completed by a pre-health committee on your campus. IUPUI does not have a committee evaluation process, and so you will select no and be submitting individual letters of recommendation. Here is where you will enter the information for the individuals who have already agreed to be your letter writers, as well as your due date. I mentioned earlier that you would want your due date for your letters to ideally be on or before the date you plan to submit your application. Once you've completed this information along with your waivers and hit save, this will automatically generate an email to the letter writer with instructions for how to log into the system and confidentially upload their letter of evaluation. Please note that if you are waiting to complete this section until the day that you have planned to submit your application, your letter writers will not already have access to submit your application. The next section is your experiences section. Here is where you will provide information on any number of experiences that you think are relevant to your application. First, you'll categorize the experience, whether it's pharmacy, healthcare, employment, or extracurricular. For each experience, you'll provide information about the organization as well as someone who can verify that the experience happened, likely a supervisor. You'll provide information about the experience, including the start and end dates, as well as whether the experience was compensated or volunteer, your average weekly hours and number of weeks, and a brief description. You'll also want to provide a title for each experience, and this is not an opportunity to be kitschy. Just create a title that is relevant and makes sense. Your 600-character description will give you the opportunity to provide the admissions committee with information about the experience and how it has impacted you. Your first sentence should address the experience context itself, so a brief descriptive overview. Your next sentence should address your crowning achievements or specific accomplishments that you would like to highlight. And then subsequent sentences should address the learning and transformation of this experience on your pursuit of the pharmacy profession. You will also be able to provide information on achievements such as honors, publications, or scholarships. Here, in the context of the brief description, you'll want to provide information for things such as honors and scholarships on the metrics by which those individual awards have been awarded. That is often more valuable information than the dollar amount of a scholarship or the name of an award, which may not be relevant to the admissions committee if they aren't aware of what it means. You will also have an opportunity to provide information about licenses and certifications. For example, a pharmacy technician license. Here, you'll provide information as well as the validity dates and a brief description. Finally, you'll be asked to submit information on your personal essay. This is a lot of reading, but essentially your personal essay is asking you, why do you want to pursue a career in pharmacy? And how does the Doctor of Pharmacy degree relate to your immediate and long-term goals? You'll have 4,500 characters to complete this, so approximately 1 page, single-spaced. After you've completed those 3 sections of your application, you'll want to move forward with thinking about which programs you want to apply to. Here is an opportunity for you to select schools that have deadlines that have not already passed. So you can scroll through and find basic information about the schools, as well as add them to your application by simply selecting the plus. Once you've selected all of the schools that you're interested in applying to, you'll find more information about each school within the program materials section. Here you can toggle between the various applications for each school. Each school's application section will have a homepage that has information provided by the school itself. This is largely information about the school as well as relevant instructions for the application. It may also include a section for questions. This would be where individual schools would include secondary questions within the PharmCAS application. For example, Albany College of Pharmacy and Health Sciences asks which campuses you want to apply to and your relationship to the college. Here, as we're looking at the application page for Neomed, you will see a very similar format. This application has a homepage section with detailed information, as well as a subsequent question section, and a new document section. In this particular section, schools can ask you to provide various documents. Neomed would like information on individuals who are permanent residents, and so asks that they submit the front and back of their card as a part of their application. If you scroll down, you'll see where you can add documents to this section of your application. Another section that you might find is the prerequisites section. Here, if I had entered coursework and verified its completion, I would be able to match courses from my transcripts to the prerequisites at each individual school. When you have completed all of the components of the school-based applications, then you can move forward with submitting your application. Here you can see that you can check on the completion of each individual school. All of these schools have application deadlines that are in the future, but if I had selected a school that had a deadline that had already passed, it would not allow me to submit the application. It will also not allow me to submit until I have completed all of the components, the progress indicator is full, and the checkbox has been illuminated. The application automatically calculates your fees based again on the number of schools that you've applied to. Once your application is ready for submission, you can provide your credit card information and hit submit. The next important section of your application is the check status application section. Here I can find and follow different components of my application. So all of the college campuses that I have included in the college section of my application will appear here under transcripts, and I can track whether PharmCAS has received those transcripts. Keep in mind, it's your responsibility to ensure that your transcripts have been received by the PharmCAS application system on time. In addition, if I had completed the letters of evaluation section, I would see a similar section with information for all of my letter writers and would be able to see when each letter had been submitted and attached to my application. Please note you cannot see the contents of your letter writers' evaluations within your application. I can also track the progress for each school in regards to my application, whether it's in progress, has been verified, has been received, or if a school selects to update additional information, whether I've been invited for an interview and/or an admissions decision. I can also download a PDF copy of my application, which can be incredibly useful if you are completing a mock interview. This way, your interviewer can see the same information that the admissions committee sees when reviewing your application. Finally, the last component that I want to point out is the notifications section. Here, you can see any notifications that PharmCAS is sharing with applicants, including when the academic update has opened. Academic update is a section of the application that opens at the end of the fall semester where you can provide grade information for courses that you have listed as in progress or planned in your application. So far, we've looked at the timeline and process of applying to PharmCAS, as well as demoed all of the components of the PharmCAS application. At this point, I want to see if anybody has any final questions that I can answer before we end our workshop this afternoon. Okay, keep in mind that you can always get your questions answered by an advisor at the PREPS office or the Health and Life Sciences Advising Center. Good luck with your application, and thanks for joining us.